Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to talk through the new Sona changes that will be hitting the PvE likely this week that will do a lot to sort of help modernize Sona's gameplay in a similar fashion to how the Xinjiao changes a couple of patches ago really helped to kind of modernize him almost too well, as he's actually getting a couple of nerfs over the last couple of patches to balance him out for pro play. But either way, that's not necessarily a bad thing to see happen, and I think Sona players could definitely use some love as their champion's been not feeling too great for, I think, a long period of time now. I really think she could use a more substantial VGU at some point, but sadly it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case, as she did recently get a voiceover update, which means that usually if a champion gets one of those without also gameplay, they're not going to get a gameplay update anytime soon. And in general, it just feels like that's not going to be the case going forward. But either way, let's go ahead and talk through the changes that Riot have posted. They made a whole Riot plays about it, but I wanted to kind of talk through the implications of the changes and what problems they're attempting to solve. Now, if you remember a couple of months ago, Sona was briefly meta as a top laner because she would just buy the harass gold generation item, and basically all she did is just hit champions. She never even attempted to last hit, she just hit champions and roamed. And while you might think, okay, a champion that doesn't even attempt to last hit me is going to fall off because they're not getting gold because I'm last hitting and they're not, and then eventually they'll fall off. Well, the problem is that first, Sona is a support pick, and supports are generally known for the fact that they don't need gold in order to function. They have a lot of value that they bring to the team regardless of their actual items. And in that regard, Sona plays into that totally perfectly, right? She doesn't actually need to have items in order to do what she does well. The other issue is that because she has the gold generation item, she's able to generate a bunch of passive gold for free by hitting you, and it doesn't matter that she's not last hitting, because once she's got that gold generation item turned off by upgrading it the first time, then she doesn't care, right? She's already cashed in. She's more or less mitigated the amount of gold she lost by not last hitting, and now she gets the last hit for free while still sitting on this gold generation item. All in all, it was kind of a degenerate strategy that broke a few fundamental points of the game, especially the fact that she didn't last hit at all. So it kind of makes sense for why Riot would try to address this, and they did by essentially giving her a feels bad mechanic where they increased all of her mana costs and gave her a mana refund mechanic as long as her abilities affected at least one allied champion. Now that will do it, but it felt pretty bad for Sona players in general because they didn't have the option of, playing on their own anymore. They just had to deal with the fact that all their mana costs were higher and they didn't get to press buttons, and Sona's abilities don't feel great as a whole. I feel like they really very much so are like, you feel kind of bad about everything that her buttons do, right? Because you kind of want to have all of them going all at the same time, and she only really has one cooldown that's impactful at all, and so it feels kind of bad for Sona then to be sort of punished and saying, why are you daring to press buttons that aren't your ultimate? So in that regard, it kind of killed off Sona, I think, in almost every lane as we kind of go along. But so either way, so that's where we were, and now these changes are essentially Riot looking at it to try and help fix it moving forward. So the biggest thing that they're doing here is that they are removing the mana refund passive. That's no longer going to be a thing, and presumably they will lower Sona's mana cost as well in order to help compensate. Instead, they're going to be replacing her ultimate cooldown passive with a new stacking mechanic that rewards her for interacting with these abilities and interacting with both allied and enemy champions. Now, whenever she damages an enemy champion with her Q, or heals or protects an ally with the shield from her W, she gains a stack of Accelerando, which gives her ability haste to her basic abilities up to a cap. Now, while she can stack this on her own, and if she's in a solo lane, right, she can still hit an enemy champion with her Q. She can double up on the Q hits if there are two targets for her Q and they're both champions, and then she can get up to 5 stacks from a single cast of W. Obviously, this requires her to have her whole team nearby plus an ally she can heal, but it still means that if she has an ally nearby that she can not only heal, but protect with a shield, which means that Sona's rewarded for interacting with this ability in a way that isn't just pressing heal off cooldown, but trying to use the shield as well to mitigate damage. That's going to be 2 stacks as well, versus if she's solo laning, she can only ever get 1 stack at a time from just queuing enemies, unless she's got an ally nearby, or she's getting ganked and can hit 2 people with her Q. In this regard, I like how Riot have gone about doing it, because a lot of these support picks that they've created nowadays sort of have built-in mechanics to help guarantee that they get played in the support position, right? Like, you can play Thresh top lane, you can play Braum top lane, you can play Taric top lane, but they all have mechanics that kind of, they don't punish you, but they also are kind of dead abilities unless you have a friend, right? Like, Taric can't cast W at all, Braum's W and E are both not necessarily worthless, but they don't feel as good without an ally to protect. Thresh can't auto-attack you during the duration of the very hefty stun that his Q gives, and he has no one to click the lantern, so that ability actually feels pretty bad if he isn't getting value from the utility that ability offers him. So in that regard, those are ways of these champions having powerful mechanics in their kit that they're rewarded for using with friends, but that they don't have to use. And in that regard, this design for Sona is much better because it does tell Sona players, hey, you can take this champion into a solo lane if you want. We've even done away with the prohibitive mana costs on her abilities, but it's going to take you a lot longer to stack up this passive on your own versus just taking her bot lane and getting the stacks there, which I do quite like these kind of mechanics. And I like how this makes a lot more sense for Sona. The ultimate passive was nice, yes, and it really reinforced Sona as a late-game support, but the problem is support is the position that gets the least amount of XP in any game. So you're basically telling Sona, hey, unless this game goes 50 minutes, you're never going to get the full CDR on your abilities. Now, Sona has the option of getting it significantly earlier in the game, which is a lot nicer for her, but it also means if she falls behind, she's not saying, well, I don't have enough XP to ever even reach level 11, let alone 16. Now she has the ability to say, well, if I play smart, and I just hang back and play more passively and just get Qs where I can, and otherwise just try to protect my team with my W, I can still stack this up to its cap, which is really nice. The other great thing that Riot are doing here is that once she's at maximum stacks of Accelerando, she will gain, she starts decreasing the cooldown of her ultimate once it's maximally stacked out, but she would gain more stacks of Accelerando. This is really nice because it gives Sona the ability to press her most impactful button, which is her R, right? Like, beforehand, Sona doesn't really have a lot of impactful button presses. She has her auras, which are nice, but she doesn't have a high moment outside of crescendo. It feels like a lot of Sona's gameplay is make a crescendo play, and then kind of hang out and wait for the next time I have my crescendo up and I can actually make a play. Otherwise, press my buttons all of the time and just give my allies all of the buffs. In this regard, I'm a big fan of her being able to get the refund on crescendo. Ideally, the cooldown ends up being somewhere around the cooldown of like Ezreal R, if you're kind of aware of how long that cooldown is, because I feel like that's a good place for it to be. It's an impactful ability, but compared with a lot of the other crowd control abilities that Riot have released, especially on newer champion kits, crescendo feels a little underwhelming compared to things like, let's say, Rel's Magnet Storm or Braum's Glacial Fissure, right? Especially given that those are tanky champions that can afford to get in close enough to go for their CC play, and Sona basically has to flash at you if she ever wants to make a crescendo play. Now with more crescendos, she can not only make a flash crescendo play for a pick, but also have it available to peel potentially in the next team fight that happens afterwards, which I really am quite a fan of, and because it's tied to the Accelerando passive, she wants to be hanging out with her friends, getting value from that, as opposed to hanging out in the side lane. So realistically, I'm a big fan of these changes. I think they're going to do a lot to sort of revitalize Sona's gameplay and get her into a spot where she's going to feel much better to play. Obviously, if you were a big fan of how abusive solo lane Sona could be, you're maybe a little bit sad about this, but you weren't playing it anyways because of the mana cost issue, so in general, I'm a big fan of kind of where this is at. So, but let me know what you guys think of any of this down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts, especially if you are a Sona main. Please let me know what you think of these changes down in the comments. I will have the whole article linked in the description as well if you want to check it out. So, go ahead and leave what your thoughts are down in the comments. Like I said, if you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and leave a like, and if you really enjoyed today's video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later.